web, the biodiversity of organisms protects the integrity of the cycle of life. We've learned the concept of a food chain, which would be a straight sort of chain where one creature eats the next in line. But in life, in nature, we don't have food chains all by themselves. That's a rare occurrence. Typically what you have is a food web where one creature has multiple prey, and then the creature above it also has multiple prey to feed on, so that if one of them goes extinct, it'll have an alternate food source. So a food web is composed of overlapping food chains. This overlap provides multiple options for predators to eat. If one of the populations in a food chain should disappear, it could kill all the creatures in the food chain. But in a food web, the other options available to predators on higher trophic levels would ensure their survival. So it ensures that we have a continuous cycle all the way around, coming back to even the top carnivore, when it dies, will turn back into food for the producer. Say if an eagle dies, it decomposes, it provides fertilizer for the soil, and the soil then grows grass. So the producers in this chain in this web are the plants. And if you see on your handout, we'll have primary consumers, and a primary consumer would be one that would take only one arrow to reach on the diagram. So if there's only one arrow removed from plants, then it's a primary consumer. So rabbits, squirrels, mice, seed-eating birds, and herbivorous insects are primary consumers because they eat the producers, the plants, directly. Now, the creatures that eat the primary consumers, like foxes and hawks, owls, spiders, insectivorous birds, and predaceous insects and snakes, are secondary consumers. And you'll also notice that some of the top consumers happen to also fall into the category of secondary consumers. It can happen that something that eats a primary consumer, it also happens to be the top consumer, or the top carnivore. In the diagram that we have, foxes, hawks, owls, and snakes are the top consumers. And the question that we're asked in part 2 is to draw in something that will take care of these top consumers, because they have no predators, but something has to decompose and something has to get rid of their carcasses when they die. And the answer to that question is decomposers, like fungus and bacteria, and you also have scavengers and detritivores. Scavengers would be small animals that eat carcasses, and detritivores would be things like ants and insects that come in and clean up the last little bits and pieces that fall down. And I drew a little picture here of a dead animal and a small creature heading towards it. So that would be either a detritivore or a scavenger. And anything that's left over is decomposed by fungus and bacteria. And if we didn't have scavengers, detritivores, decomposers, and like fungus and bacteria, then all the carcasses that would die would just sit around. And we can imagine that after a while, they would start to pile up and they would use up all the available biomass. So there has to be something to complete the cycle. To complete a food web, it would be necessary to add decomposers, like fungus. Fungus are typically found in areas where there's not too much intense sunlight because they don't like the sunlight too much. And then bacteria, which are found in the soil. And also, they're ubiquitous, meaning you find them everywhere. You find them on your body, in your mouth, inside of you, and when you die, they tend to start taking over. When you're alive, your immune system keeps them at bay, but when you die, your immune system stops working and these bacteria take over and start decomposing everything. Since top carnivores have no predators, their biomass is recycled by these creatures. Other animals and insects, such as scavengers and detritivores, help complete the process. Scavengers eat dead animals, and detritivores eat all the leftover bits and pieces, and while decomposers turn all the waste material back into soil. And when you turn that back into soil, it provides food for the producers, such as grasses and plants. In the third question, they ask us to show one food chain. So I showed plants, and the squirrels eat plants like nuts, and the fox eats the squirrel, and then in the end, maggots and bacteria eat the fox. Maggots would be detritivores, bacteria would be the decomposers. I didn't include fungus, but I could have also written in fungus. If it's left in a dark area, I'm sure the fungus also will do that. Number 4, if toads were removed from the food web, both predaceous insects and snakes would be directly affected. the population of predaceous insects would suddenly increase, and the population of snakes would probably decrease. And that would also have more far-reaching effects to the creatures that depend on these other ones that are directly in line. So the whole web would be affected as the creatures directly in line with the toad lose their prey or their predator. If insectivorous birds were removed from the food web, it is likely that they would affect the web much more severely, because these creatures have many prey and feed many top carnivores. So taking a key creature out of the food web could have a more far-reaching effect, because a lot more creatures depend on it. So with biodiversity, the idea here is that biodiversity ensures that the loss of one animal population won't destroy the whole web.